covering all kinds of different monsters, zombies, ghosts, and creatures of the night, I recently did some self-reflection and asked myself, how did I get here? I've always had a love for the sci-fi and fantasy genres, but the more dramatic and horror-themed movies and shows that I cover, all that love can really be traced back to one place. I Am Legend. Nowadays, when people hear Will Smith, they think of course, his Oscar win, also maybe the thing he did right before he won, and maybe a few other things. But personally, I'll always see Will Smith as Robert Neville, the last man on Earth, sorta, which might be a weird role to think of when it comes to Will Smith. He's got Bad Boys, Men in Black, After Earth, Hancock, Shark Tale, all beloved movies to varying degrees, but nope, for me it's I Am Legend. I think I'm probably in the upper percentile of people who have seen this movie the most times in the world. In fact, I might be the person who has actually seen this movie the most. You could say I'm some sort of legend.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
When my mom bought this movie on DVD for whatever reason when I was in like 5th grade, I could not get enough of this movie. I watched this movie every single day for probably a year. I have nostalgia for this movie, which is a very weird movie to have nostalgia for, but I Am Legend is really responsible for helping me enter the dramatic horror genre. So now that I have a whole ass YouTube channel covering dramatic horror, sci-fi, fantasy, it's time for a rewatch of this, what I would deem modern classic. So grab your rations, snuggle up with your dog, and let's slap our way right into the world of I Am Legend. So immediately booting up this movie, yes, I still buy all my movies, I was greeted with a choice. The theatrical cut or the alternate cut, and of course I pressed the alternate cut. If you're ever greeted with this choice on this specific movie, go with the alternate cut. I'll get more into that later. We start off with a lady saying that she's cured cancer, but 3 years later, this world is complete shit. No one's around anymore except for Robert Neville, his German Shepherd Sam, and his cool-ass car. He drives through the empty streets of New York City, seeing a sign for Batman vs. Superman, which I think is a big hint that this movie is partially responsible for the state of New York City in this film. He goes modern day hunting, so he must be running low on food or something, but all the deer get away except for one that he tracks down, but he lets a family of lions get the deer instead. So he goes home hungry, poor guy. He's probably out of food after all this time. Wait a minute, he's got plenty of food. So he eats dinner, tells Sam to eat her veggies, but she doesn't, so it's bath time. Robert's watch goes off, signaling for him to shut down the house for the night, and the two of them lay in the tub, hearing the sounds of growling and screeching outside from some sort of monster. Flashback time, Robert Neville is taking his family out of the city right as the apocalypse starts. The president over the radio is saying it's an emergency, the whole 9 yards. Robert says that New York City is ground zero and it's his site and he can fix this. Jump scare at the window and back to the present. Jacked Will Smith starts his daily routine and heads downstairs to his lab where he's still trying to fix this virus. By the way, this movie takes place in 2012. He's conducting experiments on rats trying to find a cure, and they're either super aggressive or dead, all except for number 6, which actually seems to be getting better. He heads back outside and goes to the store, talking to some mannequins outside named Marge and Fred. Neville compliments Fred on his orange sweatshirt and the camera sticks on him, not at all a bit of foreshadowing. Then he goes looting around the neighborhood, calls out to anybody on the radio, hits some golf balls off the Intrepid, you know, normal apocalypse stuff. Then he sees another damn deer and has to go looking for it. This guy hunts like he doesn't have any food left. Sam chases the deer into a dark building, Neville screaming after her until he's forced to go in after her. He looks around the building, seeing a trail of blood, and of course follows it, stumbling upon some sort of satanic ritual, or maybe a concert? I'm not too sure which one, but he ends up finding Sam. This creature jumps at him, and he gets chased around until he jumps out of the building where the creatures burn in the sunlight? Wait a minute, I thought these were supposed to be zombies. Neville sets up a trap, leaves Sam behind because she can get infected and he can't. Then he waits for one of the infected to come and take his blood. One creature does, and it seems that another one didn't like what he just did, so they have a stare down before the creature runs back inside. Neville takes the hostage and continues doing testing, seeing a butterfly tattoo. He tries the cure that worked on the rat, and the subject's temperature lowers, but then she doesn't like it, screams in his face, probably would have slapped him if she could, and then she dies. He reinfects her with the virus, and she's alive again. Neville is pissed that it didn't work. He records his results for the day, saying that one of the creatures exposed himself to sunlight on purpose, meaning that these creatures are losing brain function due to the lack of food, and any and all human emotion is gone. Flashback continues, and New York City is absolutely insane. Authorized people can go through the checkpoint, but Neville's wife is tested positive for the virus. He orders them to scan her again, and it's negative. So this test is really just a bunch of bullshit. He says goodbye to his wife and child, his daughter giving the puppy Sam to Neville, and the helicopter takes off. But then he wakes up again. He goes through the Farmer's Almanac and figures out that it's his birthday. As he's driving, he spots Fred in a completely different spot than before, turning his head slightly. Robert goes up, yelling at Fred, and guns him down in cold blood. Robert starts losing it and shoots all around him, thinking that somebody's watching him or something. Then he goes to check on Fred and steps into a trap, the same one that he set up earlier, but replicated here. He hits his head and passes out, blood dripping below, and wakes up hours later, his watch going off and the sun going down. He cuts himself free, but lands on his knife. Sam tries comforting him, and he crawls away to the car, very slowly. The sun continues going down, and inside the building, a bunch of infected dogs are let out. There's about a foot of sunlight to keep the dogs back, and as Neville finally gets up to get to the car, the sunlight runs out and the dogs come after them. Sam fights them off until Neville can get his gun, and by the time he does, Sam's been bit. He takes her to the lab to continue testing, but it's too late and she's already infected. He sings her some Bob Marley until he sees how bad the infection really is, and he's forced to put her out of her misery. The next day, he buries her, and without his best friend, life for Neville truly seems empty now. He tries continuing his normal routine, but the loneliness and isolation starts breaking him. He then retaliates against the infected, going on a
kinda suicide
run against them. The infected get the upper hand, and when all seems completely doomed, he's saved. A woman saved him and asks him where he lives. He tells her, and in and out of consciousness, he finishes the flashback where the bridges are bombed and the infected jump onto a helicopter that crashes into the one that his wife and daughter are on. Neville wakes up on the couch watching Shrek. A woman and child are helping themselves to Robert's food. She says that she heard his call on the radio and they waited all day for him, but he didn't come. She says they're going to a survivors colony in Vermont, but Neville screams that there's no one left. He goes to cool down and then quotes Shrek as it's playing, and they look at him how people look at me when I'm quoting Shrek while it's on. Robert and the woman Anna start talking, and she knows him because he's famous, and she plans for them to leave, but he says he's staying. She asks about his leg, and he takes her to the trap, and he thinks it's impossible that the creatures could have done this because they don't have any high brain function. They let Ethan go fishing, and when he says it's cold, it sparks an idea in Robert, and he uses ice to cool down the captured infected. Then we get a few scenes of Robert bonding with Anna. He introduces her to Bob Marley, where he reveals his daughter's name was also Marley. He shuts down the house once again, and Anna tries to convince him to come with them to the colony, but he says it doesn't exist. She continues saying that if he listens, he can hear God's plan.
If we listen, we can hear God's plan.
He drops some facts on her about how a small population of the world is immune and everybody else is a so-called dark seeker. Then he yells and says that everybody is dead. She says that there are still people alive, maybe even some people that he knows. Good thing she didn't mention his wife.
Keep my wife's name.
The conversation is interrupted when the Dark Seekers come because they followed them home last night. Robert blows up the neighborhood with some traps. He goes to find Anna, but is attacked. He gets a gun to fight back, blowing up his own kitchen. Now he's really out of food. The Night Seeker escapes and he continues searching for Anna. She's hiding with Ethan from one of the infected, and Ethan makes a noise, of course, and then Neville has to save them. Then an army of the infected converges on the home, and Neville takes them down into the lab where the cure seems to have worked. The infected break into the lab, Robert yelling, saying that he can save them, but they don't listen. The head bad guy makes a pretty great butterfly with his dirty hands on the glass, and Neville understands what he has to do. He opens the door and brings out his patient, or rather his captive, and reawakens her to unite with her love. Robert apologizes as the Night Seeker looks at the wall of Polaroids behind him, seeing what Neville has done to them, but he actually spares him. The Night Seekers leave, and the next day, Robert leaves with them to go to Vermont, passing by the lions from the beginning and leaving the Night Seekers in peace. So I always knew that this movie was based on a book, I just had no idea how difficult it was to bring this film to life. Warner Brothers owned the rights to making this film since 1970, and has seen so many different iterations of directors, actors, and even genres. At first, Ridley Scott was going to direct it, with Arnold Schwarzenegger starring with a more action movie focus to it. Then Michael Bay and Will Smith were going to do it, and I'm sure that also would have been an action movie, but Will Smith stuck with the project, going for Guillermo del Toro to direct, but he declined until finally Francis Lawrence, who would later go on to be the director of The Hunger Games, was the man to pull it off, of all the people who tried, which seems strange to me. So like I said, this movie is based off of a book of the same name, which came out all the way back in 1954 by author Richard Matheson. He's most known for I Am Legend, but you might have heard of a few of his other novels. He was an acclaimed author known for horror, fantasy, and science fiction. So on my channel, I've covered a lot of stuff in and around somehow relating to zombies. So when my friend Connor, I know you're watching this, so thanks for the idea, asked me why I hadn't covered I Am Legend yet, I was honestly kind of baffled that I hadn't made this video already. But also, watching this movie again with a more analytical eye, I noticed something that the average viewer probably didn't pick up on. You see, these zombies actually enjoy the taste of human blood, and they burn in the sunlight, so, and bear with me here, because I'm about ready to blow some minds with this, these creatures are actually more similar to vampires than they are zombies.
That's it?
In the book, these creatures are just straight up vampires. The whole 9 yards. They don't like mirrors, garlic, they die from a stake through the heart. The movie, however, wanted to be a little bit more ambiguous.
They are dark seekers. They are dark seekers. So yeah, actually, we're not. They're not vampires. In the original novel, they were vampires.
These creatures are called hemocytes, or night seekers, and night seekers sounds way cooler, so that's what I'm going to continue calling them. But even in the realm of vampires, the Night Seekers are far different than anything we've seen before. I mean, I guess that also depends on which version of the movie you're watching, so let's stick with the version that I recapped for right now, and these vampires show us that they aren't really bloodthirsty maniacs that normal vampire monsters are. These creatures all feel like they're being attacked, and they're retaliating against the opposing threat. Imagine if you were to wake up one day and aliens had captured you. You're freaked out, but you're also way stronger and faster than all these aliens, so you can easily wreak some havoc when they're trying to probe or attack you. I imagine that's exactly what's going on in the mind of the Night Seekers. These are an advanced species, capable of love, anger, strategy, and even mercy. They just look a bit deformed to us, and we initially think of them as the bad guys because they're the ones attacking us. So who's the real villain here? I'll get to that in a moment, but let's go over some of the stuff that I enjoyed about this movie first. First off, I just want to say that Will Smith actually does a fantastic job in this film. He finds that balance between being likable and also just a little off his rocker for being alone for so long, because he spends about 65% of this film just him and his dog. I actually think that would be pretty difficult for a lot of actors to pull off. He's got the right amount of charm to make the character funny, but the seriousness and stubbornness to make him a believable scientist. Some of my favorite scenes in this film are just watching his survival tactics. He sets up the mannequins and still goes to the store just to maintain a bit of normality normality in this empty world. He keeps up with the dates and when the sun is gonna set for obvious reasons, but he also does the typical apocalypse stuff like looting and hitting golf balls off the Intrepid, because why wouldn't you want to do that if there's nobody around to tell you not to do it? But of course, a highlight of this film, and a low light because of how sad it is the character Sam, played phenomenally by the dog Abby. This was another reason why I fell in love with this movie growing up. I had a German Shepherd, and she was the greatest dog in the world, and when I lost her, it made this movie kind of weirdly calming in a relatable but obviously very sad way. Dog really is a man's best friend, and this movie really only works because of Sam. If Will Smith just went around talking to mannequins the whole time, we really just think that he was crazy. But Sam offers that life support and connection to his family that helps him retain his sanity. So when he loses her, he really loses the will to live. This is all done really well and written in such a great way. Losing Sam was unfortunately essential to the story being told, but it's done respectfully in a way to move the story forward. Now, the CGI has aged terribly, particularly when it comes to the Night Seekers. These things just aren't scary in today's day and age. Apparently they tried to use makeup at first, but running around they just looked like angry mimes. So I guess I'll refer to their judgment and agree that it must have been pretty bad, but I still feel like there could have been a way to use just regular makeup in some of the more normal scenes. Like this scene when we first see the Night Seekers, this would have been far more terrifying now if these were all real people. I get that some of the crazy stunts that they do would have been hard to pull off practically, but in terms of allowing this movie to age properly, the CGI didn't do them any favors. They also might have just not incorporated it into the budget for all the makeup and actors it would have truly needed.
In some ways, changing the creatures from human beings to computer-generated creatures made my life easier.
The budget went elsewhere, like this night shoot, which cost $5 million, needed the approval of 14 government agencies to have happen, 250 extras, 160 of them being National Guard troops in full combat gear. So I think paying more people to be these Night Seekers just wasn't in their plan from the beginning. So I mentioned that there's two different versions of this film, the theatrical version, aka the bad version, and the alternate version, the good version. There's a few differences, but the major difference is the ending. Instead of Robert opening the door and delivering his captive Night Seeker to her lover, Robert cracks a grenade and blows everybody up, leaving Anna and Ethan to go to Vermont by themselves, where she delivers Robert's cure to the surviving colony of people. She has some voiceover to end the film where she talks about, "This is the story of Robert Neville, and this cure is the legend he leaves behind," or something along those lines. So basically, instead of a thought-provoking ending involving Robert and his actions, they went the action movie route, and the Night Seekers are truly just mindless bloodsuckers. The theatrical ending isn't half bad, but it also doesn't line up with the rest of the film. The title, I Am Legend, doesn't make any sense without the original ending, but also neither do all the hints and clues of the Dark Seekers being more intelligent throughout the film. I believe there's an additional scene in the alternate cut where Robert looks at the trap that the Night Seekers caught him in, saying that it's impossible for them to have replicated his trap because they aren't intelligent enough to do it, and Anna asks him why wouldn't it be possible, maybe they are intelligent. So this scene is here to set up how the Night Seekers are actually more intelligent, along with the many other hints and clues throughout the film, but this one really sets up that final confrontation. But even if you remove this scene, the Night Seekers still set up that trap in the theatrical version, meaning that they are an intelligent species, and the ending is there just because Hollywood wanted a big third act. The good guys take down the evil monsters in the end, which is just an incredibly stupid way to end the film, and probably the reason why they aren't going with it for the sequel to I Am Legend. I think a combination of these two endings would have been best if Robert took the cure with him but didn't show it to anybody, and he's the one who does the voiceover saying that it's his choice to let these beings live, and that's why he's a legend. So back to what I was saying about the villain of the film. If you watch the theatrical version, then the Night Seekers are the villains, these mindless vampire zombie hybrids that want nothing but death, which is all around just really stupid. In the alternate cut of the film, the villain is none other than Robert Neville himself. The whole film, in both versions, sets up the theme of the natural order of life from the very beginning. The last scene before the opening title card is what? Neville letting the lions have the deer instead of himself, because the lions have their own family to feed and nurture and love, so he lets them be. How in the world this is the opening for both versions of the film is beyond me, because this intro directly relates to the ending of the alternate version, just not the theatrical one. Humans are now the Neanderthals, and life goes on without them. This world doesn't belong to us anymore. There's a new natural order to life, and with this new natural order comes a new predator, Robert Neville. We see that Robert has conducted tests on dozens of Nightseekers, probably killed them all, and in the end, he sees that he's in the wrong. How do the lions play into all this? He sees them right as he leaves the city in the alternate cut, and he's reminded that this world isn't his anymore. Robert's legend is having the cure but not using it because these things aren't monsters. He is. Sure, they might look a little bit different than us, act a bit different, but it doesn't mean that they're monsters. There's a lot of different layers to that theme. The director of the film said that there's an AIDS comparison, people with a disease but still people worthy of life, and I'm sure that each and every one of you watching can also draw your own comparison to what the film really means. Or you can, watch the theatrical version where the Nightseekers are run-of-the-mill monsters, and it's just a cool action movie. Another huge thematic element of the film is the butterfly. We see it a number of times. At the start, when Robert is driving around, Marley says it in the car, the tattoo on the Nightseeker, the daughter says it again on the helicopter, there's one flying around Sam, and the Nightseeker makes it with his hands. It's also in the glass behind Robert. What does the butterfly really mean? From my own interpretation of the story, it's a little something like this. Butterflies are obviously made from caterpillars, and with the amount of butterflies in the film that correspond to the Nightseekers, it makes sense that the Nightseekers are the metaphorical butterflies, and the humans are the metaphorical caterpillars. These people aren't infected, they just have an illness, a disease that doesn't make them any worse than we are. In fact, in a lot of ways it makes them better, but that's the real message of the film. That regardless of your disease or disorder or whatever it might be, you still deserve as much love as the person who doesn't have any sort of affliction. And a butterfly is a really beautiful way to signify that. So that's what I take away from the butterfly, and really all the thematic elements of the film. That, or it's, just Batman vs. Superman's fault. So that's it for the video, everybody. If you enjoyed this one, thank you for watching. Make sure you like the video and subscribe for more content like this. I didn't really touch on the sequel that they're doing because there's not really that much information on it. Will Smith is coming back, meaning that the alternate cut is now the canon ending. Michael B. Jordan is also gonna be a star in the film, so I'm intrigued to say the least, but it'll all depend on the story and if people want to see Will Smith movies again. That's it for now. I'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah.